What kind of person demands your home, your sanctuary, without a shred of remorse? The wind howled outside my beach lodge, waves crashing against the shore like a warning, as three figures stood on my porch, their silhouettes sharp against the dusk. Their voices carried over the gale, cold and unyielding, as if they owned the very ground beneath my feet. I clutched the doorframe, heart pounding, staring at the HOA board members who'd come to tear my life apart. Karen, the ringleader, her eyes glinting with righteous fury, thrust a stack of papers at me. "This property violates code," she snapped, her voice cutting through the storm. "You're out." I'd heard whispers about the HOA's overreach, but this was war. My name is Emma Grayson, and this lodge, my late father's dream, built with his own hands, was all I had left of him. I wasn't giving it up. Not to Karen. Not to anyone. The trouble started 6 months ago when I moved into the lodge after Dad's passing. It sat on a quiet stretch of North Carolina coast, a weathered cedar cabin with salt-streaked windows and a wraparound porch that creaked under the weight of memories. Dad had poured his soul into this place, a haven from the world's chaos. I came here to heal, to rebuild after losing him. But the HOA had other plans. They called it an eyesore, said it didn't fit their vision of a pristine community. Letters arrived, then fines, then threats. I ignored them, thinking they'd tire out. I was wrong. Karen, with her perfectly pressed blazer and clipboard, wasn't the type to back down. She'd rallied her minions, Tom, a retired banker with a permanent scowl, and Linda, who hid her venom behind a saccharine smile. They wanted my lodge gone, replaced with condos or some soulless development. That evening, as the storm rolled in, they stood there, undeterred by the rain lashing their faces. Karen's voice rose, accusing me of forged deeds and illegal occupancy. "You don't belong here," she said, her words dripping with disdain. I felt the weight of their stares, the judgment of a community I'd never wanted to join. My hands shook as I scanned the papers she shoved at me. Legal jargon, signatures I didn't recognize, a notice of eviction. My father's signature was there, but it looked wrong, too sharp, too clean. I'd seen his scrawl 1,000 times. This wasn't it. "This is a lie," I said, voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. Karen smirked, as if she'd already won. "Prove it," she said, "or pack your bags." I slammed the door, heart racing, and leaned against it, the papers crumpled in my fist. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a different kind of tempest was brewing. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my father's legacy, for the only place that still held his laughter, his stories. I'd spent months grieving, but now, anger surged through me. They thought they could bully me out? They didn't know who they were dealing with. I grabbed my laptop, digging through old emails, property records, anything that could prove the lodge was mine. Hours passed, the storm's roar fading as I pieced together a timeline. Dad had bought this land outright. No HOA jurisdiction, no strings attached. So why were they so bold? By midnight, I found it, a scanned copy of the original deed, buried in an email from Dad's lawyer. It was clean, notarized, undeniable. But the HOA's documents cited a transfer, a sale Dad had never mentioned. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. I called the lawyer, leaving a frantic voicemail. As I hung up, a new email pinged. An anonymous sender, no subject line, just a single sentence. "Check the HOA's financials." My stomach twisted. Who sent this? And why? I didn't sleep that night, scouring public records, chasing leads. The HOA's budget was a maze of discrepancies. Large sums funneled to shell companies, names tied to Karen's family. This wasn't just about my lodge. They were hiding something bigger. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving a bruised sky and a soggy beach. I sat on the porch, sipping coffee, when a car pulled up. Not Karen's sleek SUV, but a beat-up sedan. A man stepped out, mid-40s, with tired eyes and a crumpled jacket. "Emma Grayson?" he asked, flashing a badge. "Agent Daniels, FBI. We need to talk." My heart stopped. The FBI? Here? He didn't wait for an invitation. stepping onto the porch like he belonged there. "You've been digging," he said, not a question. "So have we." He handed me a folder, thick with documents. Bank statements, wire transfers, names I recognized, Karen's, Tom's, Linda's. "Your HOA's been laundering money through property scams," he said. "Your lodge? It's their latest target." I stared at him, the pieces clicking into place. The forged deed, the aggressive push. It wasn't just greed, it was a cover-up. Daniels explained they'd been watching the HOA for months, tracking their moves. My lodge, outside their legal reach, was a loose end they couldn't afford. "They'll come for you again," he warned, "and they won't be polite." I nodded, fear mingling with resolve. I wasn't alone anymore. But as Daniels drove away, I saw Karen's SUV creeping down the road, her eyes locked on my lodge. She didn't know about the FBI. She didn't know I was ready to fight back. The air felt heavier the next day, like the calm before a reckoning. I sat at my kitchen table, the FBI's folder spread out before me, pages marked with highlighters and sticky notes. Daniels had left me with a warning and a number to call if things escalated. I didn't trust easily, but his badge was real, and the documents were damning. The HOA wasn't just a group of nosy neighbors. They were a machine, siphoning money through fake property deals. My lodge was a wrench in their gears, a plot of land they couldn't control. I'd always thought of Karen as a petty tyrant, but this was criminal. I spent the morning cross-referencing the HOA's financials with public records. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. Offshore accounts, dummy corporations, even a charity fund that hadn't donated a dime in years. Karen's name was everywhere, tied to signatures and approvals. Tom and Linda were complicit, but Karen was the architect. I wondered how many others they'd pushed out, how many homes they'd stolen with their forged documents and smug smiles. My anger grew, but so did my fear. These weren't just bullies, they were dangerous. By noon, I needed air. I walked the beach, the sand cool under my feet, the ocean stretching out like a promise of freedom. That's when I saw it. A small boat bobbing offshore, too close to my property line. Two figures on board, one with binoculars trained on my lodge. My skin prickled. Were they watching me? I ducked behind a dune, heart hammering, and dialed Daniels. "They're here," I whispered. Not at the house, but close. He told me to stay put, that he'd send someone. As I hung up, a memory hit me, Dad, years ago, pointing to that same stretch of water, joking about smugglers using the cove. Was it a joke? Or did he know something? That was the twist I didn't see coming. Digging through Dad's old files that afternoon, I found a journal tucked in a box of fishing gear. His handwriting filled the pages, detailing odd deliveries to the beach at night, boats like the one I'd seen. "HOA knows," he'd written. "They're watching the cove." My breath caught. Dad had suspected something, maybe even the same scheme the FBI was chasing. Had he confronted them? Was that why they were so desperate to erase his lodge? And me? The journal was a lifeline, proof he'd been onto them. I photographed every page and sent them to Daniels. The phone rang an hour later. "You're in deeper than I thought," Daniels said, his voice tight. "Your father's journal mentions a name, Victor Crane. He's a fixer, tied to the HOA's money trail. We think he's local." My stomach dropped. Victor Crane. I knew that name. He was a handyman, always lurking around the community, fixing Karen's deck or Tom's fence. Quiet, unassuming, but always watching. I caught him staring at my lodge once, his eyes cold, like he was measuring it for a coffin. Daniels told me to stay vigilant. Crane was dangerous, and the HOA was getting desperate. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the lodge felt like a threat. Every shadow, a figure waiting to strike. I kept the journal close, its pages a tether to Dad. He'd fought for this place, and now it was my turn. I wasn't just protecting a house. I was protecting his truth. By dawn, I had a plan. I'd confront Karen, not with anger, but with evidence. I'd call a community meeting, expose their lies in front of everyone. But first, I needed more proof. I reached out to a neighbor, Sarah, who'd always been kind but distant. She'd lived here longer than anyone, And if anyone knew the HOA's dirt, it was her. Sarah agreed to meet at her place, a small cottage a mile down the beach. She was nervous, glancing out her window as she spoke. "They've been at it for years," she whispered, pushing out anyone who didn't fit their plan. "Your dad, he asked too many questions." Her words hit like a punch. Dad hadn't just died of a heart attack. He'd been under stress, fighting the same battle I was now. Sarah handed me a USB drive. "Old HOA meeting recordings," she said. "They deleted them, but I kept copies." I thanked her, my resolve hardening. The HOA thought they could silence me, but they didn't know I was building an arsenal. The community center was a sterile box of a building, all glass and sharp angles, the opposite of my lodge's warmth. I stood outside, clutching the USB drive and a folder of documents, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. The HOA had called an emergency meeting, no doubt to push their eviction narrative, but I was ready to turn the tables. Inside, Karen stood at a podium flanked by Tom and Linda, their faces a mask of authority. The room was half full, neighbors shifting uncomfortably in their seats. I slipped in, unnoticed, and took a spot in the back. Karen's voice boomed, painting me as a squatter, a threat to their perfect community. "This lodge is a blight," she said, her words rehearsed, venomous. I waited, letting her dig her own grave. When she opened the floor for questions, I stood. All eyes turned to me, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "I have proof," I said, holding up the folder. "The HOA's been lying about my property. And worse." Karen's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, laughing it off. "This is nonsense," she said. "Sit down, Emma." But I didn't. I walked to the front, plugged the USB into the projector, and played Sarah's recordings. The room went silent as Karen's voice filled it, discussing creative accounting and removing obstacles. Tom's face paled, Linda's hand shook. The crowd murmured, anger rising. Karen tried to interrupt, but I kept going, showing the forged deed, Dad's journal, the FBI's financial records. "They're not just after my home," I said. "They're stealing from all of us." A man in the back stood, shouting about unexplained fees. Others joined in, their voices a chorus of betrayal. Karen's composure cracked, her eyes darting to the exit. That's when Victor Crane slipped in, his presence like a storm cloud. He whispered something to Karen, and she nodded, her face hardening. I knew then this wasn't over. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I felt a hand on my arm. It was Sarah, her eyes wide. "They're planning something," she whispered. "I heard Crane talking about cleaning up tonight." My blood ran cold. I called Daniels, who promised to send agents, but I knew they might not arrive in time. I left the center, the night air sharp against my skin, and drove back to the lodge. The beach was dark, the waves a low growl. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and waited, the journal open on my lap. Headlights flashed outside, then footsteps on the porch. It wasn't Karen this time. It was Crane, alone, his silhouette looming through the window. He didn't knock, just stood there, a crowbar in his hand. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone, texting Daniels my location. "I know you're in there," Crane called, his voice low, menacing. "Make this easy, Emma." I didn't answer, my breath shallow, every nerve on edge. The door rattled as he tested the lock. I backed into the kitchen, grabbing a knife, not because I'd use it, but because it made me feel less helpless. The rattling stopped, replaced by a scraping sound, metal on wood. He was prying the door open. Then a new sound, sirens faint but growing louder. Crane froze, his shadow shifting. Headlights flooded the porch, and I heard Daniel's voice, sharp and commanding. "Victor Crane, step back." The door swung open, not by Crane's hand, but by Daniel's, his gun drawn, another agent behind him. Crane dropped the crowbar, his hands rising slowly. I exhaled, the knife slipping from my grip. The FBI had arrived, but the look in Crane's eyes told me this wasn't the end. Karen was still out there, and she wouldn't stop until she'd buried her secrets. I spent the night at a motel, too shaken to stay at the lodge. Daniels called, updating me. Crane was in custody, spilling names to save himself. Karen and her allies were on the run, but the FBI was closing in. I lay awake, Dad's journal beside me, its pages a reminder of why I'd fought. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about exposing the truth. But as I drifted asleep, one thought haunted me. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. She'd come for me again, and I had to be ready. The motel room smelled of stale coffee and bleach, a far cry from the salty air of my lodge. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Dad's journal, its pages worn from my constant reading. Crane's arrest was a victory, but it felt hollow. Karen and her allies were still out there, their empire crumbling but not destroyed. Daniels had warned me to stay low, but I couldn't hide forever. The lodge was my home, my anchor, and I'd be damned if I let them take it. By morning, I was back, the cedar walls welcoming me like an old friend. But the air felt different, charged with the aftermath of last night's chaos. I called Sarah, who'd gone to stay with her sister. "They're panicking," she said, her voice low. "Karen's been calling board members, trying to cover her tracks." I asked about the community, and Sarah sighed. "Some are angry, others scared. You shook things up, Emma." I smiled grimly. "Good. Let them feel the weight of their complicity." I spent the day fortifying the lodge, new locks, a security camera, a baseball bat by the door. If Karen came back, I'd be ready. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about locks or cameras. It was about power, and she still had plenty. That afternoon, Daniel showed up, his face grim. "We found Karen's car abandoned near the state line," he said. "She's gone underground, but we've got leads." He handed me a burner phone. "Use this. Your line might be compromised." I nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was a fugitive now, and that made her desperate. I asked about Tom and Linda. "They're talking," Daniel said, pointing fingers at each other. "But Karen's the key. She's got connections we haven't traced yet." The next few days were a blur of tension and waiting. The community was fracturing, neighbors turning on each other as the FBI dug deeper. I avoided the beach, the cove now a place of suspicion rather than solace. But I couldn't stay inside forever. One evening, I walked to the pier, needing the ocean's rhythm to clear my head. That's when I saw her, Karen, standing at the far end, her silhouette unmistakable against the sunset. My heart lurched. She wasn't supposed to be here. I reached the burner phone, but she turned, spotting me. Her eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. She walked toward me, her steps deliberate, no trace of fear. "You think you've won?" she said, her voice low, almost intimate. "This isn't over, Emma." I stood my ground, the bat's weight in my memory. "The FBI's coming for you," I said. "Run while you can." She laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're so naive. You think this is just about your little shack." She stepped closer, her breath warm against the chilly air. "This is bigger than you, bigger than me. You've made enemies you can't imagine." Before I could respond, headlights flashed, and she bolted, vanishing into the dunes. I called Daniels, my hands shaking as I described the encounter. He was there in minutes, agents sweeping the area, but Karen was gone. "She's taunting you," he said, his jaw tight. "Trying to scare you off." It was working. That night, I barely slept, her words echoing in my head. Enemies I couldn't imagine? What had Dad uncovered? The journal offered no answers, only questions. I pored over it again, finding a cryptic note. Cove drop, midnight, March 15th. That was a month before Dad died. I checked the date. Nothing in the news, no police reports. But my gut told me it was connected. The next morning, I drove to the county records office, digging for anything tied to the cove. Buried in a stack of permits was a lease agreement for a warehouse nearby, signed by a shell company linked to Karen. It was active on March 15th. I sent the details to Daniels, my heart racing. This was it, the thread that could unravel everything. But as I left the office, a black SUV followed me, too close, too deliberate. I gripped the wheel, my pulse pounding. Karen wasn't just taunting me. She was hunting me. The SUV trailed me for miles, its tinted windows like eyes boring into my back. I took random turns, weaving through back roads, but it stayed close, relentless. My hands trembled on the wheel, the burner phone in my lap. I called Daniels, my voice low. "I'm being followed," I said. "Black SUV, no plates." He told me to head to the sheriff's station, the closest safe spot. I floored it, the lodge's safety a distant dream. The SUV sped up, its engine a low growl, but as I neared town, it peeled off, vanishing into a side street. I pulled into the station's lot, my breath ragged, and waited. No one came. Daniels met me there, his face etched with worry. "You're a target now," he said. "Karen's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things." He stationed an agent outside the lodge, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. Back home, I checked the security camera footage, finding nothing but shadows. The warehouse lead was my only hope. Daniels confirmed it was a hub for illegal shipments, likely tied to the HOA's money laundering. "We're raiding it tonight," he said. "Stay put." But staying put felt like surrender. I needed to end this. That evening, I slipped out, driving to the cove under cover of darkness. The warehouse loomed, a rusted shell hidden by pines. I parked a quarter-mile away, moving on foot, the journal's cryptic note my guide. The air was thick with salt and tension, the cove's waves a steady pulse. I crouched behind a crate, watching as a truck pulled up. Two figures emerged, Karen and a man I didn't recognize. My heart sank. She was here, orchestrating whatever scheme Dad had stumbled onto. They spoke in hushed tones, loading crates onto a boat. I snapped photos, my hand steady despite the fear. Then, a flashlight beam cut through the dark, pinning me in place. "Who's there?" Karen's voice was sharp, a blade in the night. I froze, my breath caught. The man drew a gun. I bolted, branches snapping under my feet. Shots rang out, wild and erratic, as I dove into the dunes. My phone buzzed. Daniels, texting that the raid was underway. Headlights flooded the cove, and FBI agents swarmed, shouting orders. Karen and her accomplice froze, caught in the open. I stayed low, heart pounding, as agents cuffed them. Karen's eyes found mine in the chaos, burning with hate. The raid was a success, but it came at a cost. Daniels pulled me aside, his face grim. "We got her, but there's a bigger player, someone above Karen, pulling strings." My mind flashed to her words on the pier, enemies I couldn't imagine. The warehouse held evidence, drugs, cash, forged documents, all tied to a syndicate the FBI had been chasing for years. My lodge was just collateral damage in their war. I drove home, the journal heavy in my bag. Dad had known too much, and it had cost him. I wouldn't let it cost me. Back at the lodge, I sat on the porch, the ocean's rhythm soothing my frayed nerves. The community was in upheaval, neighbors demanding answers. The HOA board dissolved. Sarah called, her voice lighter. "You did it, Emma. You exposed them." But I didn't feel victorious. Karen was in custody, but the shadow of her bigger player loomed. I opened the journal, finding a final note in Dad's hand. "Protect the lodge. It's more than a home." I didn't understand then, but I was starting to. The lodge wasn't just wood and nails. It was a symbol, a stand against greed and corruption. As dawn broke, I made a choice. I'd rebuild, not just the lodge, but the community. I'd stay, fight for what was right for Dad's legacy. The FBI would handle the syndicate, but this beach, this home, was my battleground. I wasn't alone anymore. Sarah, Daniels, even some neighbors were with me. The storm had passed, but another was coming. I'd be ready. The days after the raid were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that hums with unspoken threats. The lodge felt both safer and more exposed, its walls a fortress and a target. I spent hours with Daniels, going over the warehouse evidence, piecing together the syndicate's reach. Karen was talking, but not enough. She named names, but none led to the bigger player. I kept the journal close, its pages my only link to Dad's fight. Every night, I checked the cameras, the bat by my side, half expecting Karen's allies to strike. But the beach stayed empty, the cove silent. Sarah became my ally, her cottage a safe haven for planning. We met daily, sifting through the HOA's old files, looking for clues. One evening, she found a contract buried in a stack of minutes, signed by a company called Coastal Ventures. It was tied to the warehouse, to Karen, and to a name I didn't recognize, Elias Roth. He's a developer, Sarah said, her voice low. Big money, big influence. Moved away years ago, but he's back. My pulse quickened. Roth. Dad had mentioned him once, dismissively, as a vulture circling the coast. I sent the name to Daniels, who confirmed Roth was on their radar. He's slippery, he said. No direct ties to the syndicate, but he's too clean to be clean. I dug deeper, finding articles about Roth's developments, luxury condos, resorts, all built on land with murky ownership histories. My lodge was next on his list, a prime spot for his empire. The realization hit hard. Karen was a pawn, her greed a tool for someone like Roth. I wasn't just fighting the HOA. I was fighting a machine that chewed up lives for profit. One morning, a letter arrived, slipped under my door. No stamp, no return address, just my name in sharp black ink. Inside was a single sentence. Walk away, or you'll end like your father. My blood ran cold. I called Daniels, who swept the lodge for bugs, finding none. They're trying to scare you, he said, but his eyes betrayed worry. I didn't tell him about the fear gnawing at me, the nightmares of Dad's final days. Instead, I doubled down, meeting with neighbors, rallying support. The community was waking up, demanding transparency, but I felt eyes on me everywhere. On the beach, at the store, in the shadows. Then a breakthrough. Sarah found an old photo in the HOA's archives. Karen, Tom, Linda, and a man I now recognized as Roth, smiling at a ribbon cutting for a condo project. The date was a month before Dad's death. I showed it to Daniels, who nodded grimly. We're close, he said. But Roth's careful. We need hard evidence. That night, I went back to the journal, finding a sketch Dad had drawn, a map of the cove with an X near the warehouse. Below it, he'd written, Roth's drop point. My heart raced. Dad had been tracking him. I didn't tell Daniels about my plan. It was reckless, but I couldn't wait. At midnight, I drove to the cove, the map in my pocket. The warehouse was sealed, but a narrow path led to a jetty hidden by reeds. I found a crate, half buried in sand, marked with Coastal Ventures logo. Inside were ledgers, names, dates, proof of Roth's dealings. I snapped photos, my hands shaking, and sent them to Daniels. As I turned to leave, headlights blinded me. A voice called out, smooth and cold. You're persistent, Miss Grayson. Roth. He stepped into the light, his smile sharp as a blade. I ran, the ledgers clutched to my chest, his footsteps heavy behind me. The cove was a maze of dunes and shadows, but I knew it better than he did. I hid behind a rock, my breath ragged, as his flashlight swept the dark. Sirens wailed in the distance, and Roth cursed, retreating. I stayed there, trembling, until Daniels found me. You're insane, he said, but there was respect in his eyes. The ledgers were enough to tie Roth to the syndicate, to Karen, to everything. The FBI moved fast, and by dawn, Roth was in custody. The lodge was safe for now. The lodge stood strong against the morning light, its cedar walls glowing under the sun. I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, the ocean stretching out like a promise kept. Roth's arrest made headlines, the syndicate's collapse a shockwave through the community. Karen, Tom, and Linda faced charges, their empire of lies reduced to courtroom arguments. The FBI was still untangling the web, but my lodge was mine, untouchable, a testament to Dad's fight and mine. I opened his journal, its final page a letter to me. Emma, this place is your strength. Hold it tight. I hadn't seen it before, too caught-dyed in my tears. The community was rebuilding, slowly. Sarah led a new board, one focused on fairness, transparency. Neighbors stopped by, offering apologies, support. The lodge became a gathering place, a symbol of resilience. I didn't feel like a hero, just a daughter honoring her father. But the fear lingered. Roth's network was vast, and though he was behind bars, I knew the world wasn't clean of his kind. Still, I'd face the storm and come out stronger. I'd keep fighting for Dad, for this place, for what was right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I walked the beach, the sand cool under my feet. The cove was quiet now, its secrets laid bare. I thought of Dad, his laughter echoing in the waves. He'd built this lodge to withstand storms, and I'd done the same. The fight wasn't over. Maybe it never would be, but I wasn't alone. The community, the ocean, the lodge itself stood with me. I looked out at the water, my heart full. This was home. This was worth it.